It's so nice to finally talk with you. I have to like get this out the way, but like it is such an honor to talk with you. Like I've watched you for like
Thank you.
years and I've been such a fan of yours. You are hilarious. You are beautiful. You are so intelligent. Your
Gonna make me cry
vocabulary
in a minute.
is just so wonderful. I love
Well,
you.
thank
You're
you. That's so nice.
amazing.
That's so sweet. Thank you. That's really nice to hear. That actually is really nice to hear because it's like, I mean, I've got quite a thick skin, so I'm quite good with dealing with like a lot of the negativity, but it's
Yeah.
nice to hear the positive stuff as well. So thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry it took so long to kind of yeah, it's been a couple of months getting around to it. But
It's
yeah.
totally fine. Honestly, I've been wanting to talk with certain YouTubers, so I've just been having this like YOLO mentality where I just throw invites to people. And I don't expect anything in return because I'm just like a small YouTuber. But when you responded, I like lost it. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful.
Good, good, good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, and I was thinking, depending on like what comes up, we can like do a follow-up discussion if you like on, I wasn't sure what, like on my channel, but I wasn't sure what yet to kind of see like where the conversation goes and if there's anything interesting.
Yeah, that
I
sounds
watched
great.
Cruella the other day because I
Did
know you
you?
mentioned it. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I hate it. It's so bad. I have I started like rage writing notes.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is just totally even irrelevant to the topic, but this stuff just makes me so angry. Oh my God. Oh, it's so bad.
You know what? I saw the trailer. I think it was after the Mulan situation came out that I was just like, I've given up on Disney. They're like messing
Yeah.
with characters I grew up with. This has
Yeah.
gone too far. By the time Cruella came out, I was just like, I'm not watching that. So what I did was I watched two YouTubers that I love, Mauler and his gang of folks. I watched their commentary to it, which was hilarious. And then I also watched Jay Longbone, who I would love to have on my channel sometimes. I always joke that the day I do a video with her, I'll retire from YouTube. Like that's the end goal and then I'm done.
I'm not sure I've
But
come across
yeah.
who did you say? I know who Mauler is, but the second
Yeah.
one.
So Jade Longbone, she's like me. She's a free thinking black woman who screams on the internet about things. But I think she does it better than me. She's actually like kind of part of Mauler's group a little bit. She's not on as
Okay.
often like Rags or Metal or something like that, but when she does come on, it's quite hilarious. And she did do the Cruella reaction with them. So if you watch that, then you might get familiar with her a little bit. But yeah, that's how I watch movies now. I just watch Mauler's
Yeah.
commentary because I'm not wasting my money on that.
Yeah, because I haven't watched the Rings of Power, and I watched what I did watch was I don't know if you know the Night's Watch channel. They did they do like
No.
really long reviews and breakdowns.
Okay.
It's Shadiversity's second channel.
Gotcha.
And I just I just watched like them just yeah. And I feel like this is good, so much more entertaining than actually just watching the show. It's
Oh,
just
of
watching their
course.
sort of breakdowns of it.
Yeah, and you're supporting a content creator versus a big
Yeah.
studio that doesn't care about the stories it's telling.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's talk about Cruella then. Let's just go right into it. I don't know if you have any of your notes with you, if you wanted to talk about what you observed, but I would love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Okay, you might have to keep me on track then.
Okay.
And just like shout at me if I go off on a tangent because I have a
Okay.
tendency to do that. Where do I start? So yeah, because you kind of mentioned discussing then bad female villains in general, how now a lot of the times
Yeah.
they're like justified, aren't they? Or even glamorized to a certain extent as well.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do, I guess to give context for my viewers while they're watching this, I wanted to talk to you about female villains because I feel like with the work that you do on your channel, which is wonderful and hilarious, I've noticed that you talk a lot about feminism from various nuanced points of view that we're not hearing a lot of times. I think I had watched your video on Andrew Tate and I thought it was very fascinating because I think you were more empathetic towards the situation versus a lot of people. I feel like in general, you just approach things from a humanist perspective, but you definitely focus more on feminism, which I think is important. For me, I just like to talk about things that are silly and happen to be about social commentary. My focus more is just when things don't make sense in a story perspective because I'm a writer. I guess my whole thing is when it comes to female villains, at least nowadays, there is not a standard when it comes to their complexities, when it comes to their morality, and when it comes to the accountability. Cruella is probably the best example of this because we all know her story story. We know where like the origin story is headed, and we know that she's going to like skin puppies and like she'll gladly like murder puppies, and they're trying to make her empathetic. Like that's what seems to be the motivation behind the movie Cruella. It's not like Joker, which some people try to compare it to, which is just disrespectful. It's not like you're just like doing a character study and you're just watching this character become who they are. It's more like, yeah, she's gonna do these bad things, but like it's not really her fault. Like there's no accountability. Yeah. That really pisses me off. And it had started with the Maleficent movie, but I let it pass because I thought it was slightly more reasonable. Not by much, but it was a little bit more reasonable. But with Cruella, straight out, it's just, they should have just done Devil Wears Prada, but more tragically, and then just left it that way. But they didn't. And because of that, I just wanted to talk about it with you because I think it's ridiculous. I think it's disrespectful to women when you don't show that some women are villains. Like some women are
people, just bad people.
Yeah.
Some people are bad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you mentioned the Devil Wears Prada because I was watching it. This is the Devil Wears Prada. This is like a bad, retelling of it.
It's like the cheap version.
Yeah, basically. I had that thought though as well as I was watching. I was like, I thought of Joker and I was like, how does that make this different to Joker? As I was watching it, I was having that thought. I think with Joker, it's different because you had sympathy for him, but not his actions. It's like you can sympathize with him, but then his actions were never shown as like, I didn't feel like it was just someone in like just such a pit of like madness and despair that they were lashing out and just acting like, but the actions in themselves weren't really justified. It was like, no, that's still a bad thing to do. He's just, gone off the deep end. But with Cruella, I think her actions were, they weren't just justified, but they were portrayed as a symbol of like empowerment and rebelliousness. It wasn't tragic. That's the thing. I feel like with Joker story, you're watching a human being descend into tragedy. It's a tragic story. But with Cruella, it's supposed to be that, but it had the whole tone of it was like, no, this is like an empowerment. She's on the rise and she's winning. You're supposed to be rooting for her. Like, and I wasn't because she was so annoying and I hated her. But you were supposed to be, you were supposed to be rooting for her to like win and defeat the villain.
Yeah.
Whereas with Joker, it was like you were kind of rooting for him to pull himself out of the despair, if that makes sense. So I think they are very different things. But yeah, it's interesting because when you said that, I did notice the theme. So there was 3 films that sprung to mind with the whole female villain thing. So there's this one, which is Cruella.
Right.
And the other 2 were James Corden's Cinderella remake, where the
oh my god, I heard about that one. Yeah.
It was, I can't even remember now because it was just such a forgettable, stupid movie. But I think
it had to do about the patriarchy, as it always does.
Yeah. It was like, she was just horrific to Cinderella throughout the film. And then she goes, oh, the only reason is like, I didn't want you to get hurt because it's hard for women in this world. And I wanted to go to music school and I couldn't because I'm a woman. It's like, shut up. You were just like a cow to her the whole time. And it's like, no, but I loved you really and protecting you from the patriarchy. It's like, right, that is a load of, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but
no, no, you can swear.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn this light on because my camera is finding so much difficulty to try to like focus on my face, and I don't want this to be distracting the whole time. Okay, focus. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so there was that one. There was Cinderella, which was like a similar theme, which you then, not only, it takes all the teeth out of the villain, and the female villain, and the female character's not good, but then you deprive the movie of an actual villain. So that was the other case. So it was Cruella, Cinderella, and then the third case was the Mulan remake, where they changed, I don't remember, in the original Mulan, Yeah, so in the original Mulan, the character I found the most frightening as a kid was, the archer guy. That was who they turned the witch into, wasn't it? He was like so creepy looking and just sinister and terrifying. And then they made him some girl boss witch who was like a villain. And then halfway through, she was suddenly like, oh, I was only a villain because, again, literally, because patriarchy. And I know I murdered people, but patriarchy. And actually, Mulan, I'm like you. You've now reminded me of myself as a young girl and we'll break through the patriarchy together. And then she had like this noble, heroic death. And I'm like distracted from the main story. And it was like justified her actions but none of the other villains' actions. And yeah, you're right, there's like a theme. It was like those 3, the Mulan, Cinderella and Cruella. It was what are you doing?
And mind you, that heroic sacrifice, as Mahler and them pointed out, it wasn't even heroic, it was just embarrassing because she didn't have to do that. Like she didn't have to turn into a bird and run in front of an arrow. Like we've seen her power level. Like she didn't have to do that. Like
that's That's so true.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the other thing is that I don't like personally, because I like strong female characters. It's funny because when I was watching one of your videos about how, like, the entertainment industry is getting rid of, like, feminine women and they're just creating masculine women. And I agree. The funny thing is, though, I don't mind masculine women because I kind of connect with them. And,
I don't either. It's just when they, like, remove the
no, yeah,
ones
when
too,
they remove the nuance of femininity. Yes, and I totally agree. But the problem is, even when they're doing, I guess, masculine female villains, like, they're not actually that. Like, they're not impressive to me. Like, their power level, I don't care. Like, I'm not terrified of them the way I should be, you know? One of my favorite female villains, believe it or not, is Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, because, like, she was a force to be reckoned with. She always had that vibe to her when she walked in a room that, like, she owned the place, and, like, to cross her would be very dumb unless you wanted to, you know, die early. So I don't really get that from Cruella, from that witch. Even Maleficent, I feel like they, like, dumbed down Maleficent. Maleficent was, like, my favorite female villain as a kid watching Sleeping Beauty. I loved her because she was elegant and terrifying and powerful. I don't know. I loved Angelina Jolie's portrayal of her, but I feel the writers didn't know who Maleficent was. Like, they didn't know what they were doing with this, like, very classic, renowned female villain. I don't know. It's crazy. And like you said, it's always the man's fault. There's never individual responsibility for the actions they do. I'd rather have a female villain that knows that she's evil and owns that instead of trying to make excuses all the time. I can at least respect you for that. I also wanted to go back to what you said about the Joker, how it is a tragedy and you kind of don't want him to turn into the Joker, even though, you know, he does. They could have done that with Cruella, but the problem is that if you were to compare the movies, which is like comparing McDonald's burgers to like a filet mignon, but anyway, if you were to compare them, I feel like with Cruella, just like the author, what they should have done is from the get-go, you see like possibility and like decency to the person, because that's how tragedies work. There's supposed to be a reverse positive arc, basically. It's not like the person has a fault and then they become better. It's like the person is a decent person and they become worse. And they could have done that with Cruella, but they didn't, because from the get-go, since like a child, she's a brat and she stays that way. And so I'm not rooting for you to not become who you end up becoming. Whereas with Arthur, he was just like a very broken man that you kind of just wanted the best for him. And that's how Cruella messes up from the get-go, because I don't care about Cruella. Like, she's a twat, as I call it. Like, she's just so annoying.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and what you said about her being bratty, it's like, I think with Joker, it's a character starting out, if not entirely good, like fairly decent or trying to be decent, and then they give into their weakness, don't they? Their like fatal flaw or whatever it happens to be. But when that's done well is that the writers know that that's a flaw. But the problem with Cruella, they have like this weird tension where it's like they know she's evil, but at the same time they're like, they don't really see the flaws as like a flaw. It's like, no, she stands up against the man and she's all punk rock and she's that I have such a big issue with this for several reasons. But with Cruella, trying not to go off on too much of a tangent, but the thing with that annoyed me the most about that, so, and I can't remember, this was a while ago when the film first came out. When I hadn't seen it, I'd seen a YouTuber talk about it. I can't remember who it was now, I wish I could remember, but basically saying if you were going to do a prequel, doing something, because in the style of, like, if you go back to the original animation, 101 Dalmatians, like, she lives in this, you know, ancient manor house, Hell House or Hell Hall or whatever it's called. She's Cruella de Vil, like devil, and it's in the old animation. I mean, there's this great bit where she's like, her old phone rings and she picks it up and it's like in the shape of a devil, and it's all just very like campy and like hammed up in like the best way. And this YouTuber was saying that if you were going to do a prequel, why not do like a little bit like Addams Family style, but like about the family of DeVille, you know what I mean? Like something, you could do something really cool in that style. Yeah, that was a little bit off track, but the thing with that is like, because that was the whole vibe of the Cruella movie, weren't they? They were presenting her as like this really cool countercultural, sort of tying her in with the, you know, in the 70s, the punk scene and all of that, where it's like the point of Cruella, and they tried to keep this in the movie, but not really. Like, again, I hadn't seen this movie till a couple of days ago. We were going to be talking about this, and I was just outraged. I'm like, right, they made her like an orphan that grows up on the streets, and I'm like, the point of Cruella, like, it maybe, can't remember how much they put in the live action ones in the 90s, but I think this still comes across. But in the like original animation, she's like a high society, upper class English woman. That's like, is so integral to her character, is that she's entitled, and the point of why she kills puppies, and she's like, well, I want a fur coat. Why can't I have the puppies for fur coat? I have everything I ever want. It's not that you can't have a villain who grew up on the streets of London, but they just be a different kind of villain and have a different kind of mentality. Like, her whole aura is like, well, I get everything I ever ever wanted. And then I was like, am I right about this? Because I remember Cruella being like this. I then like did my research and looked into the character, and yeah, like she's the last in a long line from this old family. And I watched some old clips from the original animation as well. I mean, she's great, the animated character. She sort of just swans in and she's like, oh, I'll take them. Everyone around her's a little bit baffled. But what I'm really annoying about it is such a cultural thing. I don't know if you've ever come across any like properly posh upper class English people, but some of them have this like air of like just this confidence where it's like, this can sometimes say really rude things, but in either a really charming way or just with such confidence that people around them are kind of a bit like, they just kind of get what they want. It's like, well, you just sort of do the, you know, it's not everyone, all of them, but that is a definite like cultural thing that you only really get. It's like an old money like thing, and that was her. But she's like a society that I'm sorry, I'm going off on a massive tangent here.
No, keep going.
But like, she's like a society lady. She treats everyone around her like a servant. That kind of entitlement and attitude only comes from someone who's grown up in that environment and like, well, of course I should have whatever I want. And what wound me up so much about that, it's like, I just can't see how this version of Cinderella, who's like fighting the man against the system, she's grown up on the streets of London, she's had to really work her way up in the fashion industry. How do you get there to her as like this, you know, it doesn't make sense. It's a different person, it's a different character.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
and it's like the puppy murdering almost isn't even because she's evil, although she is evil, but it's more just like, well, why shouldn't I have a coat made out of puppies if I want it?
Right.
Yeah. I know that's kind of a bit off track, but that just stuck out to me so much, that you taking that cultural element out. I'll stop because I've been writing about that for ages.
I agree. It would be like a California person, like a rich California person or a rich New York person, where they're just like, I don't see what the problem is. I should have had it yesterday. Like that type of attitude. I definitely agree. I think you would have two options as a writer. This is the thing that always drives me insane, because I'm like, I'm already rewriting your story for you and you're not even paying me, but it's fine. The one option is what you said. She grows up already in high society, high class, rich. So she has this entitlement mentality. The other one is that she has a psychological traumatic issue, that she's kind of like sociopathic. So she is a survivor, a fighter, and when she finally gets what she wants, because she's been through all of that hard work, she doesn't understand why she doesn't deserve what she fought for. There's two versions you could have done, but no matter what you do, it's not what we got, which is basically like, you are an orphan, you understand what it's like to not have a lot, and like most people who are poor, give or take, not everyone, but like some people who grow up that way, they become more empathetic, compassionate to other people. So it doesn't make sense why you end up the way you are, that we know you're going to become. And she would like flip back and forth as well. Like one second she's crazy and sensitive, then that second she's not. Oh, that was the thing that drove me insane. The split personality thing between like Estella and Cruella, I hated that. I also hated that she was born with black and white hair. That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in a movie, and I didn't think that was ever possible. I've watched Twilight, like, what? I'm all over the place myself, but to like put it all together, for me, what I would have done, because I'm cruel, is, I'm the real Cruella, is that I would have it that like she had a tragic backstory. Like maybe dad was like this crazy person who was like a hunter, so like he hunted animals a lot. So she grew up with like kind of this already barbaric disconnect between animals or something, and then one day like the father like kills her mother or something, and then like she has to kill her dad, or he kills himself, suicide, whatever, and she grows up with like that trauma. As a child, when you have something that traumatic, it messes up your emotional state and like your ability to connect or understand things, because it's already been disconnected from something so traumatic. So maybe she grows up in projects, in the orphanage, whatever. Maybe she finds a way to actually get into fashion school and like get good at it, and she wants to like be known, so she gets hired by Emma Thompson's character, and like the more she gets competitive, the more Devil Wears Prada she becomes, the more she's willing to sacrifice of like the little bit of humanity she has left in herself, you know, friends, betrayal, backstabbing, all of that. Miranda Priestley levels of like, oh my god, you are a jerk. She changes her name to Cruella, or she was born Cruella. Like, pick one. Don't do the like split personality thing. Like, make it a stage name, or you were born Cruella. And she dyes her hair black and white as a fashion statement to stick out among people. She's not born with black and white hair. That literally was the easiest thing they could have done for her character as a fashion statement, and they made it like a gene. This isn't X-Men. Like, people don't grow up like that. You have blonde, brown, black, whatever, but like, what?
Which would make sense if they were gonna make it like really sort of cartoony and campy, like the kind of old movies, or you know, the original animation. But yeah, you're right. If they wanted to do like something actually actually dark and like serious, like a Joker style thing, that would have been a good route to take. But I think they were torn between that because it's still kind of a kid's movie. So it's like it was kind of weirdly cartoonish and upbeat, but then actually dealing with some like quite dark stuff. It's like either make a ridiculous cartoon villain or do a really dark retelling of Cruella.
Right.
But like trying to have both, it was just really, really strange.
Yeah, you can't have your
and
cake
let's
and
like
eat
a
it too.
cartoonish, yeah, let's like a cartoonish feel, but not in a good way. It just felt kind of bizarre.
Yeah, conflicting. It was very conflicting. Like you said, you can't do both. And really, you shouldn't do a Cruella origin story if you're not gonna do it more maturely anyway, because she skins puppies, for crying out loud. I'm surprised Disney got away with that, honestly. Like she says in the animation and in the live action with Glenn Close, like she's like, I don't care what you do. You can drown them, skin them, burn them alive.
Yeah.
I don't care. Let them suffer. I just want their fur. Like you said that in a kid's film. Like kids aren't that dumb. They know what you're saying. Like you're saying you're gonna murder puppies, but then they don't have as much of a gall to do that with the actual Cruella origin, where she does cruel things, says cruel things, you know? They did the same thing with Maleficent, which I didn't catch at first. When I was still following Jeremy Jahns, he had mentioned that in the live action Maleficent, when she does the curse, she says that Aurora will sleep for eternity, but in the cartoon, she says she'll just die. Like the cartoon had more goals to be honest and be like, no, she's just dead. Like she dead. Like she's not sleeping, she's not napping, she's dead, you know? And it's the same thing with Cruella. You're doing a story about a woman who is psychotic for the sense of pleasure, for the sense of fashion, whatever. Like go all in or just don't touch the movie. Like nobody asked you to make these live actions in the first place, which is the problem.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I've actually never seen Maleficent. I've seen sort of clips from it, but there is that thing where, I mean, I remember watching the original Sleeping Beauty, and the same with 101 Dalmatians. It's like somehow the animated movie, the animated villain, is more terrifying than the live action version.
Yeah.
Which should be the other way around.
Yep.
But yeah, the animated version has so much more gravitas in both Maleficent and, although I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen clips of it. It's just doesn't seem that frightening. And then Cruella as well. It's like, it's weird. Like with Cruella, it's like, I think they're trying so hard to make her really likable or cool. But the thing is, she is already a fabulous character. I mean, she's evil, but she's one of those characters that you love to hate. She's just, you know, she just sort of swans in like, Anita, darling. And like, she's brilliant and terrible. And you know she's evil, like you love to hate her. And she's kind of charming despite all that. And it's like, you didn't have to make her good. You could still be like, yeah, she's still evil and bad, but she's a bit charming and fun character. She's fun to watch on screen.
Yeah.
And Glenn Close did a brilliant job of like portraying that. That's the other thing as well, and this is a little bit off topic, but like I like Emma Stone. I think she's a good actress. I don't know, either it was just like an off day or something, but I just don't think she had enough charisma to like pull off Cruella in that way. I mean, there's big shoes to fill. Glenn Close did like a fantastic job of it, but yeah, it like despite how cartoonish the kind of 90s 102 Dalmatians were, it was like fun and felt real. Like she somehow managed to make it feel real at the same time as being really cartoonish, and I just felt like this Cruella was like cartoonish but then trying to be serious off somehow, and I don't really know why.
No, I agree with you. It did feel more cartoonish, and I don't know if it's Emma Stone or the director or the script, but it definitely felt cartoonish. I think I've been saying this recently in the few videos I posted recently, but I had started taking acting classes, so now I have a say in that field as well. It did feel like she was trying to play a character and not a person, and when you're doing live action, it becomes more obvious when you're being kind of cartoony. And I think she was also like, I don't know, like she was trying to play up something that maybe she couldn't really connect with, or something she couldn't fake. I feel like Glenn Close, like her playing Cruella, like when you're watching her, like you feel like you're walking on eggshells because any second she'll snap at you. Whereas Emma Stone, I feel like if she snapped, you would just be like, okay. So anyway, like as I was saying, you know.
Like a little kid. Yeah. Like it was felt bratty. It didn't feel scary. Yeah. So I don't know. That's the one thing I give credit for Angelina Jolie, is that she did do Maleficent justice. It's just the writers didn't. But Angelina Jolie definitely was Maleficent for me. Like when she says well, and then she walks in with a smile, I was like, that's Maleficent, you know. I didn't have to doubt that, you know. But then when Emma Stone's like, Anita, darling, I'm like, you look like you're in cosplay. I can't. Yeah, it really did feel like that. you know what it is, and this is because I feel like in a weird way Emma Stone's Cruella, or like the way that character was written, was way too self-aware.
Yes.
Like you know what I mean, like in the sense of like she was Estella and then she was being undercover as Estella and then she was switching to Cruella, and it's like, I mean, again, going back to that kind of cultural thing of like, that's kind of what I mean in the sense of like having like an upper class upbringing. Like you kind of have to have grown up in like a bubble a little bit to not even, it's like original Cruella characters, while she's very evil, it's like she's not really self-aware. If she was self-aware enough to kind of look at herself and Emma Stone's Cruella felt like she was self-aware enough to be able to step out of herself and look at herself and how she was behaving, then it's kind of like, well, why are you doing all these things then? Whereas I feel like, yeah, that was a key thing about original Cruella, is that she's just completely lacking in self-awareness, and it's not even so much that she's tricking Anita and other people, it's just that she's just in, everything's about her. She's so self-obsessed.
Yeah.
I mean, she kind of is trying to trick them, but it's not even really that. It's just like, oh, dark, like she's just so self-obsessed and so like it's all about her, and so the reactions when she snaps are like genuine rather than like calculated. Was she calculating? Do you get what I mean? I don't know, it's kind of like a subtle like difference there, but it really, yeah, oh my god, I was so angry watching that film.
I understand what you're saying. Like, it's not calculated in the sense that she acts a certain way because she has this like big 4D chess endgame or something like that. The only time she acts calculated, if you even want to call it calculated, is like when she wants something and like she knows that the person's not just gonna give it to her, so she's gonna then go get it herself in a way.
Yeah.
And the other thing that bothered me about the acting, I'm very big on mental health awareness. I'm not a fan of the whole split personality thing because it really excuses the person for what they do. And in Corella's situation, I don't see the need to do a split personality. I really don't. It doesn't fit her character history. It doesn't fit who she's going to be. She could have just been a little less cruel than she becomes, but she didn't need to be a split personality. But if you're going to do that, you need to do that really well, because now you're not playing one character, you're playing two characters. And I really don't feel like there was a difference between Cruella and Estella. It just felt like Estella was a people pleaser who had like her villain phase of Cruella, which really was just like being a little bit mean or a little bit rebellious. Like, it wasn't cruel. Like, it wasn't like, oh my god, this is not even close to Estella. This isn't Estella pretending. Like, this is a whole different identity, because that's what split personality is. It's literally a whole different person, basically, inside another person. And I didn't feel that.
It was weird because it was kind of like they were trying to do the split personality angle without really doing it, because she didn't really like switch or anything. It was more like they kind of played with the idea, but she didn't really. It was just more, you know what it felt like? It felt more like a kid and her imaginary friend.
Yes.
Like that she just like was playing at it, like just decided, oh, I'm going to be Cruella now, rather than like an actual genuine mental health thing. It was just very strange.
I think she should have watched like Split with James McAvoy. Even this actress in the TV show Ratchet, she had to play multiple personalities, and I believed her when she was playing the different personalities. One of them I think was a guy too. But like, split personality is like a serious thing, and if you're gonna do that as a writer and an actor, like, you need to do your research, because like it's very serious, and you really have to convince someone that like there's one person you're playing and then another person you're playing, and like having to separate those in each scene, and then sometimes transitioning out of one into the other. I don't think she did that at all. I think there was an old movie with this actress, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like something Jane, or This Is Jane, or I Am Jane, or whatever. And this actress had to play like 3 different characters, I think. And she did a good job of like convincing you that each character was different. But you also saw her like transition out of like one character to the other, where like she would like fall asleep and then wake up as the next person or whatever. I didn't get that from the whole Cruella Estella. And I think it is a split personality, because as a child, her adoptive mom is like, what are we gonna tell Cruella? And Estella's like, thank you for coming, but I'm here now, or I'm in charge, or whatever. And it's like, okay, so like you're doing split personality without saying it bluntly, but if you're gonna do that, like you need to convince me these literally are 2 different people. Because if they were, Estella would be traumatized and terrified of Cruella every time that she came out to play when Estella was unconscious, and see like the damage she left behind to her friends or her job. Like, she would not be so like, oh yeah, Cruella was in charge for a bit, okay, I'm back, hi. It's like, no, that's not how people who live with split personality are like they hate it. They don't like they're in control of their own self. There are other people inhabiting it. Like, it's terrifying. And I didn't get that. Like you said, it was like an imaginary friend.
Well, yeah, it did sort of feel like a little kid playing dress up or trying on a costume or
Yeah.
something. It was
Yeah.
like putting something on. That's the thing. It's like they didn't commit to it. They sort of played with
Nope.
the idea, but didn't commit. Yeah, rather than being like something to use as a plot, it felt really unnecessary. It felt like the only reason they did it was to try and excuse Estella of like some of her behaviors. I mean, can I give? I'm gonna give spoilers for the film, but yeah, it was like her mum's like an insane sociopathic murderer. Therefore, she was always going to turn out. I don't know. It was just a really bizarre like.
That was the biggest cop
that was her
out.
destiny. Yeah, it was like so.
Yeah.
Her destiny was always going to be to turn out that way, no matter how good she was initially. I feel like if you're going to do that, start her off like just like that right from the beginning. Yeah, and then it absolved her of responsibility. It's like, well, whatever she would have done in her life, she would have ended up there anyway because that was her like genetic destiny or her like
Which doesn't make sense for a few reasons because she was born from two parents, so she could have taken after either of the morals. But also, morals aren't genetic; they're taught. Yeah. You can grow up from a psychopath, but if you're adopted by nice people, you'll be a nice person. Like that's why it's more confusing because her adoptive mother was a nice person, almost to a fault. She kind of enabled some of her brattiness, but she was a nice person. So Cruella should have been a decent person. She shouldn't have been an asshole just because her mom was a psycho woman. And for them to do that, it literally doesn't make sense, like on a scientific level, but it also just doesn't make sense from a social level because, again, if you grow up around decent people, you'll be a decent person.
I think if they were going to do that, what actually could have been interesting is if, well, because we know right from the beginning that she's nothing like her mother. Even though they try and say, like, they try and use, like, her genetics as a justification, we know that she's nothing like her mother because her mother doesn't care about anyone to the point that she was willing to kill her own child several times. But Cruella cares about people. We know this because she's living with Jasper and what's his name, the other one that she grew up with.
Horace? I think.
They've proven that she's able to care about people, to build relationships. So already just in that, she's not like her mother, who her mother just is unable to care about anyone but herself. Only if they were going to do that, what could have been really interesting, because even at the end of the movie, they kind of show that she still cares about Jasper and Horace, and though she's kind of mean to them sometimes. I feel like, I don't know, you could have had like the same story. You could still have had her grow up with them, but then it's kind of revealed at a certain point, like she's just so insanely clever, and also is just like her mother, that she just doesn't care about anyone, that she was just using them the whole time. Like that she's faking empathy or faking a relationship with them. And then by the end, they're kind of trapped, because they're the two ones in the later films that help her like kidnap puppies, aren't they? I don't know, I feel like that could have been quite disturbing, quite dark, but quite like good as well. I would have probably enjoyed that movie a lot more if it's like she was playing them and playing people around her, and she actually was that kind of, then it would make sense more, rather than she's just like her mother, except she's not, because she does care about people, and her mother like willing to kill her own baby. So it's just like very it was weird.
The annoying thing about the reveal of her mom is that like Emma Thompson is like the actual Cruella that we're used to.
Yes.
Like she's closer to who we would see as Cruella. One of my favorite parts is where like she's cutting people's dresses. So she's like, nah, don't like that. She gets to Cruella's dress and she like cuts it and hits Cruella's arm. And she's like, why are you making noises? And she's like, oh, you nicked me. She's like, She's like, yes. She raises her hand and she's like, this color red, that's what I want for this dress. I'm like, that's Cruella. How is it your mother is better at this than you are? This is ridiculous. And also, like, she's not like her mom, not only because of Horace and Jasper, but also because she has dogs. Anybody who has a pet, unless they're a psychopath who abuses their dog or cat, most people who have pets are very empathetic to just anything. So like, how do you go ahead.
But also, I just want to see the writer's room where they're sitting around going, right guys, here's the pitch. So retelling of Cruella, we're going to tell her origin story. Oh great, yeah, so what happens? Like, how did it start? Okay, so hear me out. She loves dogs. Like they made her character for like the whole part of her life up until like her 20s or whatever. She loves dogs. She's got a dog that's with her the whole time. Like, just because Cruella, you associate her with dogs, doesn't mean she loves dogs. Like, oh my god, I was like, are they seriously doing this? They're seriously doing Cruella origin story where like dogs save her life and she loves dogs. And then how does she go from that to I want them for a coat? It's just so weird.
I don't know. You got to do a crazy level of Doctor Strange like magic going on to try to like curveball this thing, because we are off course. We are way off course because this is not the Cruella we know. Like, she not only will skin dogs, she'll skin anything. I think in the cartoon and definitely in the live action, she had like skinned tigers bears and like other animals, like some that are endangered, like tigers. She didn't care. She loves fur. She lives for fur. She worships fur. Like she literally said that. For you to then create her origin story and like she's friendly with dogs and she loves dogs. And then to even do something stupider, which is why I feel like they knew what they were doing. To make a sly joke where she's like, they would look fabulous as coats. And then Horace Jasper is like, that's a bit dark. And she's like, I'm joking. I'm like, then why are we here? Like, what was the point of the story? Because like, that's the Cruella we came for.
It was like Cruella wasn't real, wasn't it? The whole way throughout the film. It's like, well, the fact that she pretended to skin Dalmatians and make them into a coat. And she was like, oh, they're not real. You didn't really do it, did you? She's like, of course I didn't really do it. You know, it's fake. It's not real. I'm like, but she does though. You guys do realize that at some point she does want to do that. So you haven't like absolved her of, you know, doing evil things. And the whole like Cruella thing, because they tried to do the split personality thing, but like they didn't. It did feel like a facade, like that she was pretending to be evil just to show the world, like, look how punk rock I am. But actually, I'm a good person and I care about people on the inside. It's like, that's what I mean with the too much self-awareness. She almost made herself a character and then looked like could step outside and look at herself, whereas Cruella's incapable of doing that. She's just self-obsessed, vain, greedy, just entitled, just cares about, you know, furs and, you know, looking fabulous, and that's it.
And the thing that's like, I don't understand, like, you have a Cruella film, she loves fashion. Why wasn't the movie mostly about fashion? Like, why wasn't it like Devil Wears Prada, where like we're learning about the fashion industry in the 70s? Why were we more focused on like the dogs and stealing and not being like everybody else because you're brilliant, genius, whatever the freak that brat said? I wanted to yeet her off a building, but like it had nothing to do with the fashion industry. It's so weird.
That's a good point. I'd have actually had probably a fun time watching a film that was kind of like The Devil Wears Prada, but with an evil Anne Hathaway. So like, if you just saw her just been like unapologetically evil, just screwing over other people, like she ruins someone else's like project or whatever it happens to be, just screws over everyone around her to get to the top. That could have been quite fun. And then you're like, yeah, she's evil, but you know, she's Cruella de Vil. So but instead they're just like, no, but she cares about dogs, really. Really, really strange.
You know what would have been better if Cruella was similar to Emily Blunt's character in The Devil Wears Prada, where like she's like from birth, like I just loved fashion, like this is the industry, like I don't have time to have empathy for people, like I have to get everything done, I need to go to Paris is very important, you know, things like that.
Well, that's like a reason, isn't it, for her behavior? It's not, in her mind, she's not evil. It's just that fashion is the most important thing in the world, and you can sacrifice anything. You know, for the
she's just very competitive. She's not cruel. She's competitive. You know, like she's just like, I'm not being mean. Like this is the industry. Like you either toughen up and do what's necessary, or you get out. Like this isn't for the weak ones. You know, like if she had that attitude, I'd be like, great, love to see where this goes. She didn't do that. She was like this. Oh, I want to get into the fashion industry and please pick me, and I really like fashion. It's like, who is this? Who is this?
They didn't know who she was at all, did they, the character?
No.
Why do we reckon they keep doing this then to the female characters or female villains?
I think because like the third wave or fourth wave or whatever tsunami wave we're on of feminism, I think we're at a point now where there isn't equality anymore when it comes to even villainy of women. Like it's bad enough you don't get enough feminine women, you don't get enough humanized women, right? Now you don't even get good villain women. And honestly, I just think because whatever women are working on these projects, or male feminists, whatever, like they are convinced that like women can do no wrong. And I guess they've never looked at like female serial killers, the rate at which mothers kill their children more than the fathers, like situations that prove that like women can be just as evil as men, you know, dictator queens, whatever, like they exist. And I guess that's just, it's not good because I think they fear it'll give reason for women to not be treated right or equally or something. Like somehow it's going to reflect negativity about women that'll justify men to try to like continue the patriarchy or something stupid like that type of logic, instead of just showing that like men and women, we are both capable of evil, good, and in between, and just keeping it like that. I think that's what it is. They're trying to jump the gun run on something that I don't think anybody would try to shoot an idea of anyway. I think that's what they're trying to do, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I wonder if also a lot of it's about power. So it's like even when they write a character to be bad and they know that character's evil, if that character's powerful, it's like they can't quite help themselves. Oh, but she's a boss bitch, and we love that. You know, it's like, and you can still appreciate, like I said, the original Cruella, there was nothing wrong with, like, she's a fun character. You can still appreciate like just how like terrible she is, or how she just bullies people around her, and kind of admire that without glamorizing it or without excusing it. But yeah, it's almost like they kind of have to be like, oh yeah, she's this tough queen character and she you know, could kill people or whatever else, but like she's been through hard times and she's powerful. And yeah, I don't know, or if it's just now become such an extreme reaction against being perceived as powerless in the past that it's like now having to go to, I don't know, or if there's an element of like vengeance in there, but or we can do it too, like, look, you guys think you're just the, you know, oppressive, evil, you know, we yeah, I don't know if there's an admiration of power. It's like, well, doing the right thing or morality doesn't matter as much, which I think you can take that beyond like the whole feminist question. I think we're wrong that there's like a bit of a theme now where it's like, seems to be a cultural, I don't know about theme, but like feeling in the air of like good or bad, I don't know, but like, are you powerful? That's you know, that's the question.
I think I agree with you, but I also think there's this funny contradiction, because I think we're all contradictions, paradoxes, as I say a lot, because that's my favorite word. There's this admiration of power, but I also think that there's this fear of power, because I think if they really wanted to show powerful evil women, they would go all in. But I feel like they're like, we're powerful, but like, you don't have to be afraid of us, like that type of like like hesitant, instead of going all in like, we're powerful and I don't give a shit, like, you know. I don't see that, at least not nowadays. I don't see that. There's always having to be this justification or like cushioning of their brutality or whatever, so that they're feared but also liked, you know. But like, you can't always get that. Sometimes people will just fear you, or they'll fear you and respect you, but they don't like you. Like, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, basically. And in the end, at least I don't observe it, these characters, I mean, as powerful as they think they are, or as empowering as they think they are. I think the old school female villains like Maleficent, Ursula, the evil queen, Cruella, like those are more terrifying, because they didn't care. They did not care. As long as they got what they want, that's all that mattered. Kill a baby, fine. Kill a woman who's singing to animals and taking care of dwarves, fine. Kill puppies, fine. Kill a king and possibly his mermaid daughter, fine. Like, they didn't care. They wanted what they want, and that was it. They were unrelenting, unforgiving. They were unstoppable, and they didn't care as long as they got what they want. And they were willing to die for it, because they did. So, but nowadays I don't get that in female villains, at least not with the Disney live actions. I don't get the sense that like they would die for what they want, and they don't care who they hurt along the way. I think putting Jasper and Horace with Cruella in her origin story was actually a bad idea, because now we are going 100%. To feel worse when she starts to really abuse them and mistreat them, versus the origin story is just about her, and she meets them like at the end, and they're like guys down on their luck or something, you know?
But I mean, again, going back to the cultural thing, that's why it makes no kind of sense her growing up with them, because the whole kind of dynamic they had was that she was like, well, I'm entitled, I live in this grand house. I mean, they don't have any money anymore, but she's still like, you know, an old money family. It's the point, like, well, I'm upper class, but you two plebs, you're going to do what I tell you, because I've hired you to do this job, so you're going to you're going to do it. It's like, it's like that dynamic of very much like she treats that, you're like, you're my servant, and she just got disdain for them. She's not got any respect for them. It's like, but then when you have them grow up together, it takes all.
They're basically family, so it's very weird for her to just switch. And even they kind of call her out on it near the beginning, like, you can't like just treat us like this. Like, we've been through the dirt together. Like, why are you acting like this? I'm surprised they put up with it, because I think real people would just leave. They'd be like, okay, so we're done. We're done.
Yeah, well, that's kind of another reason why it doesn't make sense giving them that familial bond, because you know, in the originals, you understand why they're there. She treats them terribly and she shouts at them all the time, but they've been paid. They're criminals. They've been paid to do a job. She's like, so where it's like, if you've grown up together and you've seen someone change into who the person you didn't care care about, they're a different person now,
Yeah.
you'd probably be like, right, well, I'm out, goodbye.
Yeah.
And what you were saying about feeling like you don't feel like a lot of these villains would like die for kind of what they want, but they're not, you know, as scary as well and compelling as the old villains of the past. I think part of it is that you could still make a complex character that has good points and, you know, and is complex as a writer and have sympathy for that villain, but also go, but they are a bad person, they do terrible things, and kind of go, and I want them to get what they deserve. Like, it's almost like that kind of mentality where it's like, I feel like the writers, they don't really believe that Cruella has done anything deserving of being punished for it. And they don't really believe that the evil stepmother in Cinderella has actually done anything deserving of being punished for it, or the villain in Mulan has really done anything deserving of being punished for it. Where it's like the old female villains, it's like they didn't hold back on, you could still have them complex and have motivations, but it's like, well, they could still have a soft side, but they've done horrific stuff and they deserve to be punished for it. And as the audience, you're like, I want to see them suffer, or like, maybe not, but like justice. I want to see justice be done. But they don't really believe in, it's almost like they don't really believe in the concept of justice, or they don't really believe that she's done anything worth being like held to account. So they're just unwilling. That's what they're like, unwilling to hold these kind of female villains to account in the same way that they would male villains. And often you see with some like bad male like characters,
right,
they overcompensate and hold them to account too much for something where it's like, are you really going to give him that harder time? He just like made a stupid joke and now he's like, I don't know, you're punching through a window or something.
It's a lack of nuance and it's a lack of maturity. I think they have a very childish view of human beings and human nature. I think they think that if they think a person has good motivation or good intention, that excuses them from the horrible actions. Even though the phrase that good intentions lead to the road of hell or pave the way to hell or whatever, like there's a reason that saying exists, because you can have good intentions and still do very bad things in the name of good intentions. And you can look at that throughout history. I guess it's hard for someone to believe that even though Cruella skins puppies and stuff, she's innocent because she had a bad childhood or the patriarchy or whatever. And it's like, she might have been a victim to someone else, but she's also a perpetrator to someone else. And that's real life. Like, people can be a victim in one instance and then create victims in another instance. Like, those can both be true. And that's what it takes to like be an actual adult and realize that like life is more complicated. It's not black and white. Like, when you're a kid, you can only process so much, so you have to see things black and white, which makes sense. But as you get older, switching from teenage to adult, what makes you an adult is to realize that life is more complicated, and it's not as easy to say, well, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, and that's it. Like, that's not how life works, you know? And somebody could be a really bad person, but you could still feel bad for like how they grew up or something like that, or just how they were born. Like, I was watching Ted Bundy, his like tapes before he went to death row or whatever. Like, he had a decent childhood, but I think he was just born off. Like, he just wasn't born healthy, even though he had a healthy childhood. And that sucks because nobody asks for that, you know? We all like don't really take advantage of the fact that we're not born as psychopaths. We have a chance to just be sane. Not everybody gets that, and that sucks. But that doesn't justify all the things he did to those women and the pain he caused their families. But that's life. Or there are people who do good things, but they also do bad things, and that kind of puts a stain on the good you saw in that person. So that's life. But I think these writers nowadays, especially my generation or our generation, we've been too coddled from previous generations, so we can't handle the idea that someone, like the yin of yang, like someone could be evil but have a little good intention in them, or someone could be good but have a bit of bad in them, or whatever. Like, I don't think people can handle that complexity nowadays, because then you don't have as much control and certainty of like life and yourself, and like it just sends like you into this huge like existential crisis, basically. Like, it's easier to just keep things simple than to let it be like chaotically complicated. And I think this is just a form of that with the writing of this story.
It's an immature worldview. And it's also, you know, going back to what you said at the beginning, it is insulting to women as well. It's like, well, you're not responsible for your actions, really. Because do they do that so much with male characters? I can't really think of, there might well be some, but
if they're not white.
No, that's spicy.
Sorry, I cover some of the black commentary and community, so from my experience, when it comes to black men, sometimes, they'll be like, no, it's fine, because, you know, slavery or something. It's like, no, we are judging people as individuals, not their ancestors. Thank you very much.
It is insulting, isn't it, though, to, like, various groups, whether, you know, women or other groups, because it's like, oh, but, it's soft bigotry of low expectations, isn't it? Like, sort of a pat on the head, and don't you worry. It's not for you. Everyone else has got to be held to this high moral standard, but not you. Don't you worry about
We're
it.
not
You
expecting
just,
anything from
yeah,
you because
yeah, exactly.
you
We're
can't probably
expecting
do
childish
anything.
behavior. Yeah, I feel like that was all over Cruella, really, wasn't it? She just behaved like a brat and was just, I'm gonna kill puppies now because my mummy was mean to me that I didn't even grow up with. And you can still have sympathy for a character like that because there are tragic things that happened to her. But it's like you could have sympathy, but she still chose to then do terrible things, and that's terrible, and she should be held to account for that because there's also so many examples of people who've been through terrible things, like horrific stuff, and have then done good with their lives or not gone, and it's like, well, yeah, at the beginning you're at a disadvantage, but that still doesn't excuse the behavior because you're, in control of your actions. And
there's some people who grew up with all of the advantages, privileges, whatever you want to call it, and still ended up being jerks or psychos or destructive. So I don't think really where you come from should justify who you become. It can make it harder for you to become who you want to be, but I don't think it's an excuse.
It gives reasons, not excuses, doesn't it? It's like a reason, but not necessarily an excuse.
Precisely. That's how I feel about, mental illnesses and stuff. Like, that's why, again, I don't care for the whole split personality idea, because whether someone has mental illnesses or not, especially, speaking from my own experiences, that's a reason why a person might act a certain way. That's not an excuse. The person should still be held responsible for what they've done. And I think Joker does that better. Like, I think the writers do a good job of not trying to excuse him because of his childhood or mental illness or anything. It's more just like, watch the story of this unfortunate man just continue to spiral into misery, basically. We're not trying to say it's okay. We're not trying to say it's necessarily anybody's fault, but like, this happens in our society, Doesn't mean the person shouldn't take responsibility for their part, but also I think it's a bit of just like encouragement or warning for us as people to treat each other nicer. Not that it's our responsibility to decide how someone ends up, like that's not on our responsibility, but it's just good to be a decent human being to someone else because you don't know what they're going through. Like, that's kind of what I got out of that, on top of other things. But with Cruella, all I got is just like annoying woman who cosplays. Like, that's what I got out of it.
It was boss babe vibes, wasn't it? It just can be very grating, that whole thing. But you're right. I mean, the thing with Joker is like, you can empathize with someone, you can even empathize with them to a really great degree, and still not like put them on a pedestal, justify, excuse their actions. Like, when I was watching Joker, I felt desperately sad for him. Like, so, kind of really painful watching that. But it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, but he didn't mean it. It's like, no, it's a tragic story. You can feel desperately sad for someone, but he made the wrong choices and did bad and terrible things. The thing with Cruella, they didn't make her sympathetic. I think that was what they were trying to do. Like, if they were going for sympathetic, they completely missed the mark. They just got like, kind of annoying and bratty, and I'm a boss babe, therefore I can kill puppies.
I think it's also a reflection of like how things are nowadays. Like, in the news, you might see a crime go on, and like the criminal's a guy, and everybody's like, bury him at the stakes, whatever, burn him, bleach him, hang him, whatever. You see a woman who's a criminal, and they're like, oh, well, maybe she was trying to feed her children. Immediately, the excuses come pouring out, like the empathy, whatever. And I think it's like the same thing with villains nowadays. Like, people look at Joker and they were like, oh my gosh, you want us to empathize with like a white man, or like you want us to empathize with like crazy white men, or like, this
incels, wasn't it, they said?
Yes, yeah. And like, this is gonna cause people to go into theaters and shoot people up, which didn't happen. So now you have like egg on your face. Good job.
Well, I remember at the time people saying it was almost like they wanted it to happen.
Yes.
Like, they were bigging it up so much that it's like,
yes.
Well, if you keep no one's done it. But if you keep making a big deal out of it and go, hey, it was almost like wink, wink, hey, no one go shoot up a theatre. Wink, wink, don't do it. Wink, wink. Like, all right, chill. So,
they were afraid
no one said they were gonna do
it. They were afraid of the Dark Knight incident, but I learned recently the guy wasn't even inspired by the Joker. Like, he saw it afterwards. He wasn't inspired by Heath Ledger's Joker at all. He just happened to like dye his hair orange or something. Unfortunately shoot people, but like, he wasn't inspired by that, which I wouldn't think so, because his hair wasn't even green. Like, that was the red flag for me immediately. Like, your hair's orange, it's not even green. So like, what? But yeah, nobody went to a theater, shooting up folks at the Joker premiere or any other time of the showings. If anything, I think people related to the Joker, not because everyone's crazy, but because the Joker represents anybody who's at a job, a shitty job, or just does not like dealing with people every day. I think anybody can relate to that. It's just Arthur went down a way darker path path that most of us will, hopefully.
Well, it's a great, like, a story of extreme isolation. Like, what does it do to human beings to be so isolated and invisible and not cared about? Like, it doesn't do good things. But there's a massive outcry with that. But then with stuff like, I don't know, Cruella, or then it's no girl power.
No, nobody's mentioning female shooters in a movie theater or anything like that. The other thing I wanted to say about Cruella is just that I honestly don't know why they wouldn't just go all in with her story. Because you can really say a lot and be very nuanced, even about the current culture, that it's not healthy for anybody, women or man, to be so obsessed with your career that you basically sacrifice your sanity, your morality, everything. Like, that's not healthy. Like, it could have been a tragedy of, like, maybe don't take your job so seriously sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, they could have said something. Well, that was the
Devil Wears Prada story, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was like the moral of that was don't sacrifice what's right, and then, you know, your personal life to such a degree, you know, for career success.
Yeah, like, what are you willing to sacrifice for greatness? Whiplash covers that as well, even though I haven't watched it all the way through, but I know that that's what it covers. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice for greatness? Like, do you think greatness is as good as we all fantasize it to be famous, to be the best? Like, what that really looks like is more or less hell, because you're just sacrificing everything for this one thing that at any second you could no longer own, you can no longer enjoy, no longer be known for. Like, then what? Cruella could have done that easily, and it didn't. And that's very sad, because not just as a female character, just as a character, like, to not get to enjoy that type of character study, that type of story, it's unfortunate. Like, society is missing out when good stories are replaced with garbage or overhanded agendas or whatever. You know, it's not helping people who go to see them.
That was a good point as well about, like, working hard, because in Cruella movie, I didn't actually, from what I remember, she just seemed to be having fun the whole time with everything she was doing. That you never, even though it was kind of, the movie was kind of trying to pretend that she was working really hard and having a miserable time, she didn't seem to be. It was just like she walked in and it was really easy for her.
Yes.
Like, okay, she was for a little while she was cleaning toilets, then after that it was just like easy, and then when she was that, it was like never really looked like it was hard work, like blood and sweat and tears. I didn't really get that vibe from it.
And it doesn't make sense, because I feel like it was like out of the blue. They were like, oh, by the way, like, she loves fashion, but like we didn't see that in her childhood much. Like, if she was like a fashion prodigy, you still have to show that. Like, you have to show when she's a kid and her mom is like poor, but she's trying her best to like save up money to buy her nice fabrics so that her daughter can practice outfits. Like, she uses her mom as like a model or something to like practice outfits, and that like builds the relationship. Like, it's just the little things that can make this story better.
I feel like as well, rather than the obsession with fashion in general, the whole point is that she's obsessed with her. If, like, as a kid, you could have done it so well where she was like, maybe she's like obsessed with animals, like beautiful looking tigers or something. Like, she loves how, and that's like interesting because there's like a genuine like love there of like, oh my god, it's beautiful, but like kind of dark, that it's not the well-being of the animal she cares about. She's looking at the fur, the coat, and just like how beautiful that tiger is, or like this, you know, really kind of gorgeous looking spaniel or something. She's like, oh, that make a nice hat, I don't know, but you know, or just like, or even like looking at the feathers of a bird, like, because then it's like that implies like some kind of like artistic and creative genius, but in such a way that it's cold, it's like disconnected from the emotions. And that could have been interesting, obsessed with this higher art and like that really specific thing of like how they look, but it's more just, there's something a bit like macabre and like more morbid about it, that she just, you know, wants to skin them and wear them, but but to have that like passion or something, no, she just likes graffitiing on her jacket and punk or whatever, you know. It's like
yeah, like, I did enjoy the fashion, even though we didn't see much of the process of it. I did enjoy whoever the fashion designer of the movie was. I enjoyed their work.
The dress, was it the gold beaded dress at the end, you know, the show stopping piece?
Yeah.
I did love that. I love that.
I mean, I quite liked her red dress that she, like, Katniss Everdeen lit the thing on fire, even though that made no sense.
That was such a Hunger Games.
I was like, somehow I can suspend my disbelief that in future dystopia, like, they can fake fire and the effect of it and even, like, deteriorate stuff. But here in the 70s, I'm calling bullshit. Like, no, you never said there was a magic system here. So I'm supposed to believe that this exists in the 70s? Okay.
Yeah. So much of the CGI looked terrible as well.
The dogs.
The CGI dogs. It's so bad. I was watching going, this is bizarre.
Oh my god. The 90s did a better job of like training dogs, like actual dogs.
Yeah. I don't know why they couldn't have sort of done something like that. I would have loved like some really like gothic, slightly campy, but kind of mysterious story about, I don't know, in their crumbling old manor. It could have been cool if like, you don't have to be obvious about it, but just little subtle references to like the devil or something, or like just even imply like an air of like, not magic, but like, did they sell themselves to the devil? Who knows? Because they had that in like the original, I don't know. I just thought that was cool. There's so many directions they could have gone with it, and they don't take the absolute worst one.
Yeah, I feel like too much of it is just on the nose. I hated that like her name was Estella, and she would say something like slightly mean, and the mom's like, your name is Estella, not Cruella. And I was like, gag. I rather her name is like Margaret, and she does something near like the midway point, and someone's just like, wow, you are really just a freaking cruel woman. And she's like, okay. And then she goes, thinks about it, and then she sees the name Ella, and she doesn't have to say anything. Show don't tell. And you see the wires going in her head, and then she goes in, right, maybe for like a new project, whatever, and they're like, name, and then she's about to say it, and then it cuts to the project and it says Cruella, and it's like, Cruella, what's a good name? I don't know, like Cruella something, like it's not Deville yet, like we don't get Deville until like the very end of the movie, like slowly builds her name, her reputation to what we know it is, and we understand the Easter egg. But when you make like really blunt winks to the audience, like get it, because Cruella, Deville, get it, it's like you're taking us out of the film instead of it just being a story that has like these sprinkles of like Easter eggs in them, you know? Like that's why I like Joker, because it almost didn't feel like a Joker film. Like you almost forgot it was like an interpretation of one of Joker's origin stories until like near the end.
That was why I watched it, actually, because I'm not really a big fan of superhero films, but then it was like, it's not superhero films, and I watched a great movie.
I mean, if you're gonna do a Cruella film, I would not make it campy, at least for me personally. I would make it like Joker. I would make it like you almost forget it's a Cruella film.
Yeah, well, there's like, I think that's the thing, they tried to do both, didn't they?
Yeah.
They like either pick one, either go like campy or go like dark origin story that's not cartoonish.
Yeah.
Pick one. They tried to do both, and it made it really weird.
Yeah.